Welcome to Beyond the Press Release, a production for Gorecom, in which we speak to small cap executives about what's going on at their companies and most specifically recent news. Back again, Poet Technologies trades on the TSX Venture Exchange under the stock symbol PTK, and for our friends in the UF on the OTCQX under Poet F. For those of you who are new to the story, to understand Poet Technologies, you have to understand something else first, and that's you. And what I mean by that is every day, people like you and I around the world, we're binging Netflix, watching YouTube videos, shopping on Amazon, streaming Spotify, and even doing this, Zooming multiple meetings now. And we do it all demanding the fastest speeds possible. Anything less than the speed of light is unacceptable. But that's not all we demand. We want more. While we're doing all this, we also want artificial intelligence to know our preferences, recommend the next product, movie, song, video, or hotel. So anything less than the speed of light plus supercomputing power is unacceptable again. So all that computing power comes from servers. We know this, right? Most people know it. Comes from servers, data centers, and cloud computing. But what connects all these for the fast transmission of data? Poet Technologies brings light speed to that world. So to make all of this happen on such a grand scale, 24/7, 365, we need two things. An enormous amount of computing power, we got that, but you also need speed. Lightning speed for these servers to transmit the data between each other and then serve it up to you. So that's where photonics comes in. All right, this is where the tech side comes in, but now you understand the progress here. Photonic devices create, detect, and manipulate light. Laser generated light is fundamental to all these, and which require the fastest transfer of data possible. They just need it. Poet has developed a unique, disruptive, and differentiating new entry into the photonics market, and that's their Poet Optical Interposer platform. We won't get to the tech side of that. That's what the interview is for, but all you need to know, it's patented and that it enables lower cost, higher performance across a wide variety of applications, like data centers we just talked about, which alone is a $3 billion market opportunity. 5G, we know that that's coming. Artificial intelligence and edge computing and more. The Poet optical interposer is what's needed to make all these applications work as they intended, fast. All right. So if you understand that conceptually, you understand Poet. And today's press release, Poet Technologies enters artificial intelligence market with technology leader in photonic computing. Gentlemen, welcome back to the show. Happy New Year to all of you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Great press release today. I want to start off with a quote that caught my interest in your press release, and want to talk about that. Artificial intelligence, at the cusp of its own revolutionary impact to humanity, is driving an unprecedented demand for computation at the same time that the physics of digital semiconductors, driven by Moore's law, is reaching its end. All right. So talk to us about how big of a problem that is and what Poet is solving through this press release.
Yeah, let me start, Jeff. Again, thanks for giving us the platform here to reach out to the broad world and our investors and our shareholder base. Given a kind of behind the press release view as to why we think it's significant, and why have we put out this announcement at this point in time. I think over the past few months that we've been talking about, our path, technology, platform, roadmap, we had always talked about, a few pillars that we intended to participate in. By and large, and it continues to be our primary focus, is the pillar that we call data communication. So this is where we use our technology to communicate information from point A to point B. So we are basically the medium of communication, generating the light, detecting the light. With this new announcement, we are moving into the regime of data processing. So we're not just communicating the data that's been generated from point A to point B, we're now working with technologies that allows us to process the data and do computation on it. And that's kind of where this whole concept of artificial intelligence kind of comes in.
Right.
I think it's important to understand kind of the evolution of what is artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence kind of has evolved from this whole concept of Internet of Things, a lot of devices that are interconnected, communicating with each other. So it's machine-to-machine communications as opposed to necessarily having everything to do with machine-to-human interaction. And that whole arena of communication between connected things is broadly classified as artificial intelligence. And it's basically providing cognitive powers to processors, okay? And within the arena of artificial intelligence, there are kind of two primary processing requirements that come into play. One is what is called training, and the other is called inferencing. And we'll get to that later. But I think just to give you an idea or a simple example of what I mean, training is you show the picture of a cat to your computer and say, this is a cat, this is a cat. Show another cat, show 10,000 cats, and train the computer to say, okay, this is a cat. Inferencing is now your computer suddenly sees an animal on the road, and it now needs to determine what animal it is, and it has to recognize the fact that it is now a cat. So that means it takes its training data, uses that data to inference what it is that it is seeing. And so that is inferencing. So in all artificial intelligence computing workloads, you will hear the term training or you will hear the term inferencing. And we will get to this later as we go through this dialogue as to what inferencing means, how does photonics apply, and how does POET play a role in it. Just to, in terms of these pillars that we're talking about, I guess I'm trying to just break it down into an analogy. I keep trying to come up with a different analogy each time.
And Suresh, by the way, these are great analogies. These are great. So keep on. Yeah, I love these. And I know the people at home really like these because right there, that was a fantastic description of training and inference. So yeah, please continue.
So let's assume I think for much of our shareholder base up north of the border, and you guys are very familiar with mining. Right, so let's take an example of mining. I mean, of course, in this day and age, mining needs to be very sophisticated because the good old easy to access mines are gone, and so you're going to need a lot of new technology, sonar, and so on and so forth, to determine if there is something worth kind of pursuing. And so you kind of go through the speculation phase, you go through a prospecting phase, and then eventually you validate, yes, there is such a material. And then eventually you get into drilling and then deployment of the product and eventually sales. And so there is a process as well in mining. And with mines, you can have gold. Sometimes you have gold and silver. Sometimes you can have gold, silver, and copper. But the basic infrastructure that you're setting up to tap that mine is fundamentally the same. You just find a different material, validate a different material, and go after it. So similarly, we're kind of in this phase where we've deployed the infrastructure, which is our optical interposer platform, and we've kind of validated that interposer on data communications, which is, let's say, material one in the mine. And now we're applying that same basic infrastructure and going after a new material that is also present in this mine, which is part of our total available market in this context. And so that's what this announcement is about, is we're now validating the extension of our platform, the extension of our technology to a new application or a new mineral in this particular case. And as we validate and gain traction in that space, then it goes through its process of deployment and then eventually go to market. And so I think we're definitely farther along in data communications, but this is our first foray or our first application of our interposer technology and platform to the field of data processing, which is different from data communications. And so from that perspective, it's exciting. It's a very large market, but it is definitely behind relative to data communication. So our step is, data communications first, but we don't want to lose track of the momentum that there exists in artificial intelligence. And so we're starting to kind of expand our application base to other market verticals that we have previously discussed and communicated.
Great explanation. So that begs the question, Suresh, are you guys coming along just at the right time? Because it sounds like from that quote and from what you're saying, artificial intelligence is just going to be critical, period. We can't go back, but we're running up against the limits, the limits of digital semiconductors. So do you guys think as a result of this, you're going to be able to really help solve this problem for a lot of your customers?
So if I can, Suresh, just to add,
Sure, Vivek.
Suresh described in layman terms what artificial intelligence means. So the world's most valuable companies today, artificial intelligence is becoming central to what they do. They are completely depending on artificial intelligence. However, today's digital computing, coming from CMOS technology, cannot keep up and provide the computational power, okay, or steam, if I may, needed to solve those issues of processing, which is, in artificial intelligence, you need insight extracting. You need, as Suresh described the example of the cat, to make sure that when they see a new cat, they know it's a cat. And also problem solving using cognitive computing. So this requires processing massive amounts of data. And today's digital computing, ASIC computing, are basically running out of steam because they're stuck in the CMOS world. So what our customer is doing is using photonics to break that barrier. Okay, and in photonics, as we've said continuously, you need electronics, you need optics to make the whole system work. So our customer has ASICs, photonic chips, and all. And what we are doing, again, coming to the fact that we are providing a very innovative hybrid integration platform for integrating various photonics and electronics components, we are helping them to integrate those in our optical interposer platform. So it's able to work for them.
And this is not a small market, right, Jen? So in the press release, you mentioned the chipset market for AI applications is projected to grow from about 18 billion now, or in 2020, just finished, to over 65 billion by 2025. So that's a 2.5 time jump, which normally, isn't the biggest jump in the world. But considering the fact going from 18 billion to 65 billion, how well positioned is POET now and going to be in order to grow and capture some of that market?
So we are making
I think, go ahead, Vivek.
So
I think it's important. Let me put some perspective. So I think the TAM numbers are relative to artificial intelligence chipsets, right? And they don't explicitly talk about what fraction of those chipsets are going to use a photonics processor versus an electronics processor.
Sure.
So 99.9% of that market today is all electronics. But as the workload increases and the proliferation of these processors increase, there's definitely a need to make that transition out of purely electronics processing for a critical aspect of this, what is called an inference engine, and towards photonics. And there are many reasons to convert to photonics. But one of the biggest reasons is, it's much lower power consumption and speed because it's using light, but it's also massively parallel computing. And photonics is actually very well suited for massively parallel computing because it uses multiple wavelengths of light and so on and so forth. So it effectively, it kind of is a good fit for that particular class of processing. This is a class of processing for inferencing and machine learning. It's not a general purpose computer, like you might have a CPU in your desktop. This is a very particular, massively parallel computing engine. And And so we do expect that, over the next few years, it's still in its nascency from a photonics perspective, although from an electronics perspective, a lot of companies are already doing a lot of machine learning chips. But we feel that our platform is very well positioned because we're agnostic in terms of electronics and photonics and the breakdown of the system. What we provide is a seamless integration platform that provides hybrid integration capability of light, photonics ICs, electronics ICs. And that unique capability is what our customer is going to be leveraging to create these inference engines or photonics engines for AI. Go ahead, Vivek.
Yeah, so in short, really, with our platform, so AI, companies that are developing these smart ASICs and super photonic chips and all, they need to make it work altogether. So what we are providing it, making it easier and feasible for our customer and artificial intelligence in general, as you asked, for them to integrate their smart chips on our smart platform to create and bring the solution to the market, really. So it can actually see the light of the day. So that's what the optical interposer is doing. And
Nice.
yeah.
Well, now it's if we stop the interview there, some people think, okay, so it looks like Poet is really positioning itself for the market that's kind of come to it in the next couple of years. But in this press release, you actually say that in addition to highlighting, the adaptability of the Poet optical interposer platform, this project is anticipated to result in revenue for Poet this year in the form of NRE and potential initial product sales. So let's talk about that, because that's given the way you guys are talking, you'd almost think that this is something that you're really gonna be setting up, and obviously you're gonna be growing into it more. But let's talk about the NRE and initial potential product sales this year.
So
Tom, you want to take that, or
I can start it. So because this is product development, we've told shareholders previously that the kind of NRE investments that we're seeing today are kind of an order of magnitude smaller than the ones that we saw in 2019 and early 2020, where, in connection with a major company, we proved out the technology. That was a technology investment. Now that we're on the product, the engineering investment that's being made by the customer is of a smaller scale, but it usually includes a supply agreement along with it. And in this case, that's what we're seeing in this particular agreement. So that we have a reasonable expectation that once we pass through all the gates of the product development and the qualification process, that we'll get real orders. I think for phase one, we're in the couple of $100,000 range for revenue, which we will only be able to recognize when we actually deliver the designs to the customer. And there may be more in subsequent phases, but again, it's an order of magnitude less, but the benefit is that there's a supply agreement attached to it, and we have a reasonable expectation of production revenue associated with this kind of agreement.
Yeah. So just to add to that, what Tom mentioned, we are out of technology development going into product development. So the level of NREs are not the same scale. However, this is very meaningful because what it's paying, so we have certain customization that we need to do for the customer. So this customer, the NRE pays for that incremental cost that we need to incur, but also pays for a certain part of our fixed costs that we would incur anyways, keep going on our development. And the third thing is the learning and the development that we are doing. Again, it's very fundamental. So it can be reused in different products that we have. And lastly, but most important, which Tom mentioned, now we want as we come out with products, we want revenue and longevity of the investment that we are making on our side, as in our engineering activities and the technology platform we've created.
What does it say, by the way? Because look, I've been in the small cap space for over 20 years, and it's not often that a small cap company gets a chance to enter agreements with much bigger companies. But quite often, those bigger companies don't want you to use their names. So in this case, we haven't, and I know you can't mention who it is, but what should we be inferring from the fact that this is your language, a technology leader in photonic computing? What should shareholders take from that in terms of size of this partner?
I mean, look, I think you could. I mean, there are several companies, and trying to do processing using photonics. I mean, this is new. This is cutting edge. This is not something that is you can't go and buy it today, right? So this is currently being developed. So within the realm of some big companies, there are small projects that does photonics, but then most of it is driven by smaller companies. That is typically how innovation works, at least here in the Valley. So we're when we talk about somebody who's a technology leader, we understand what the technology requirements are to win in this kind of business, and we believe that the partner that we have allied with has as a technology capability that we believe is very suited for photonics processors, especially for massively parallel processors. And that technological approach also leverages quite heavily what POET can bring to the party in terms of the integration platform that we offer. So we believe that we've partnered with a leading technology choice in terms of how this photonics processor is going to be eventually taken to market. It's like Betamax and VHS. I mean, they were both means to get video out to people. There are so in any point there are multiple ways to get to the end goal. We believe that this is a unique way of solving this photonics processing issue for massively parallel computing that we're, I guess, excited about, because it allows us to get exposure into a market and a customer base that is different from data communications. They tend to be different kind of people or companies. But I think getting that exposure is important for POET, but at the same time, it also demonstrates the versatility of the platform that we're building, that we're able to attack such different market segments, seemingly in parallel.
So George, just to, as a technology partner of this customer, they see partnering with us as their differentiation. They don't want their customers to know who their partner is, although, it's not kept a secret with the technology we are providing, but they want to safeguard that differentiation, and that's the reason.
But does that get, from an internal point of view, from a third party, because Suresh, you said something interesting before, we believe, and small cap CEOs have to say that at the end of the day, right? Because if they don't believe it, they shouldn't be the CEO. But at the same time, the market almost demands or gets much more comfortable with third party validation. So I know we can't talk about who it is, but internally, what kind of third party validation how does it make you feel to have this kind of third party validation wanted to partner with POET on this?
So George, are you saying, I'm not sure I at least kind of completely understood your question, third party validation of our solution?
Just the fact that they want to work with you, right, to enter the artificial. Yeah, how does it make you guys feel internally? I wish we could share it because you can't share the name, but internally, is this put a big smile on everyone's faces to say, okay, we've really we've got a big company here that wants to
So I
work.
can tell you, artificial intelligence today is the most one of the most exciting things happening, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in data communications, whether it's in autonomous driving, everything. Artificial intelligence is a huge approach that is penetrating everything we are doing today, right? For us, and especially I can say from my personal experience being in optical for last 30 years, optical is a quote unquote a geeks industry. Okay, so to get out of that and be in such an exciting next generation, I can tell my children, teenagers, that yay, I'm working on something that's going into artificial intelligence. All that is really, really exciting. Okay.
Exciting enough that in this press release, you actually state the company that you were working with is breaking the mold by integrating photonics into the accelerators for artificial intelligence workloads. I mean, that's a pretty bold statement, right, guys? That says a lot about where this company wants to go with POET.
So what our customer is clearly evaluated and convinced us also because of the approach they're taking. So power consumption, besides computing power, which is used with the photonics or neural networks, which works like the approach of the brain, how the brain works. So besides that capacity increase, power consumption, reducing the total power consumption is key, and reducing the dollar per bit is the key also, because if you have so much data that you have to process. What our customers' solution, it's reducing that power and dollars by order of magnitude. Okay, so that's why we believe what they're doing is totally a game changer.
Let's get a little technical. Oh, Thomas, you want to add something there?
Well, I just wanted to add, if I may, that
of course.
What it also does is gives the end user the ability to bring the computing power closer to the edge. And that's why it's part of an edge computing solution. Currently, if you're using artificial intelligence, many companies are going to the data centers and the data center operators in the cloud to have the processing done for artificial intelligence. And that's a costly activity. So if they can do it less expensively, locally at the edge, where the cameras are maybe, or where there's some interaction with the physical world or other people, then that reduces the overall cost and really broadens the market for these devices.
I'm glad you brought that up, because this is the part where I want to get a little bit technical, because I think we owe it to everyone to talk about the technical a little bit. Suresh, earlier you talked about what an inference engine is. Try saying that 5 times, and what it does. So let's go on to the question: what unique features does the optical interposer bring to the architecture of the inference engine? So is it a single chip or multiple chips?
Well, I mean, what we provide, and before I get to that, let me just provide some context to what Tom just brought up, because he introduced the word edge, and I want to make sure that people understand what that is. I think very, very simplistically, a network is typically characterized as core, access, and edge. So in a simple example, you can think of your internet service provider, let's say, as your core. The Wi-Fi in your house is the access, and your phone that is connected to the Wi-Fi, or your TV that is connected to the Wi-Fi is edge. So that's kind of typically how the networks kind of break down. And so obviously from a number of devices perspective, there are far more edge devices, far fewer access devices, and even fewer core. I mean, that's just kind of the way the networks are built.
Right, makes sense.
When people are talking about more computing at the edge, what they're really talking about is, I think we've kind of moved away from a mainframe computer that is kind of purpose built to cloud computing, which is a shared network where a lot of computing happens in the cloud. And that doesn't support low latency computing, especially when we're talking about things like autonomous vehicles, where cars have to make decisions. It can't send the data to a data center before that analysis is completed. So there's a need to have more computation at the edge. And that's kind of where the artificial intelligence product growth is expected to be, is more on the edge of the network, which is a lot of devices. A very simple example might be, let's say you take a picture of somebody and they've blinked and their eye is shut. So then, the way you have to deal with it is you take a picture, you look at it, oh, your eye is shut, let me click again. And then you pause again and you click again. But if the camera or your phone could understand that, whoops, the person's eye is shut, so it immediately automatically clicks a second time to ensure that it's got a shot. That is the difference between an edge computation where it has taken a picture, analyzed it, said, whoops, the eye is closed, clicks again, versus you having to kind of intervene and make that secondary decision. That is an example of edge computing. So that is what artificial intelligence is expected to largely be available, at least proliferate initially on the edge, where a lot of these devices are. And that's why the volumes are so high, and that's why the market potential is so large, is because that's where it's expected to have its biggest impact. And the same is true with drones, is an edge application. Alexas or Siri, I mean, these are voice-enabled edge applications. So they just tend to be much higher in volume. So from getting back to your technical question on optical interposer, what we provide is a hybrid integration platform. So these are inherently quote unquote single chip solutions, but the chip in this case is a chip scale package, which would hybrid integrate indium phosphide lasers with our filters and, maybe a silicon photonics IC, ASICs made with, basically CMOS technology. So what we provide is an integration platform that creates effectively an optical multi-chip module. So it at the end of the day, it looks like a single chip solution, but effectively it's a hybrid integration of multiple chips.
Now, Vivek, that was the geek question and answer for the people at home who want at least some deep dive into all this. That was great. And Suresh, if it wasn't for your example, I would have been totally lost on it. But I think everybody, given the example you used, could grasp the concept. But for the geeks, that was something I guess they really need to hear. Guys, give us a sense for how big the edge computing market is. But from the examples you were giving, Suresh, it just sounds like the edge computing market is big now, I guess, but it sounds like it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, because that's what the people are going to demand, right? They're going to get used to that. And so how big is the edge computing market, and where do you guys see it going?
So as Suresh described, all your terminal equipment in a way, whether it's your phone, whether it's your computer, whether it's your car, whether it's, everything getting closer to the customer, the consumer, is where the edge computing happens. So, in terms of dollars that we've seen, and correct me here, Tom or Suresh, but it was 33 billion going to like 65 billion in a couple of years. So that's really the segment where the initial deployment of the neuromorphic type of computing, optical computing, would be used. But as the data processing speeds and requirements get closer and closer to the consumer, and consumers have all these devices and that need all the artificial intelligence, it penetrates deeper, and those volumes will skyrocket.
And let me add something, Vivek, because what's key to that is low energy consumption and low cost. And the optical interposer and a computational engine built around the optical interposer is inherently a lower in energy consuming device. And so, these applications could proliferate in things that we don't even understand or can't articulate today.
Yeah, I was actually the same thing, Tom. I was actually thinking, where does it go? What bounds does it have? It almost seems like we don't even know what bounds edge computing has for the next several years. Just like maybe in 2000, we couldn't see how far the internet would go. We thought web surfing and email was it. How could we have ever thought about Zooming, right?
And I remember a time in which I used to have to carry a heavy case to power a cell phone, right?
Yep.
But what makes the smartphones really work and work for a long time is lower energy consumption and low cost.
Guys, I want to thank you for coming on to discuss what otherwise would have been a very, it would be very difficult for 95% of investors to understand the importance of today's press release. And I think we covered a lot of great ground. And I think anybody who's watching or listening to this is probably even more excited than after reading the press release. I'll leave last word to you guys. You guys nominate who you want to give the last word, but the last word about this press release and how important it is that in the first week of 2021, POA Technologies has come right out of the gate really strong.
Suresh?
I think, as we signed off, we talked about, our increasing confidence in the capabilities of our platform. And we talked about the light bar, which was a CW laser. We explained what a continuous wave laser was. Then we went and talked about a directly modulated laser. And we really talked about the importance of that, which was, just foundational of flip chipping of our lasers on the platform. And this is now the next evolution where we've taken those building blocks and morphed it into a different application, completely different market segment that we believe is really important and is going to be an important market segment for us as we gain traction in the market in the data communications realm. I think as we start getting down the path of deployment, you are going to see more of these kinds of announcements, which communicate to our shareholders and our investors that we are continuously making progress. There's innovation at every turn, and of course we want to get these products out in the hands of customers and drive revenue. That is a process. We're engaged in that process, but it is also important that we're not so tunnel vision that we can't take care of some parallel applications that leverage the platform. That's kind of the whole point of building a platform technology, is so that to the extent possible, we want to be able to start leveraging its capabilities in parallel market segments. And so we set the stage for it back at the AGM. We talked about it. We talked about the pillars that are going to be underpinning our revenue over the next several years. And this is natural. I mean, this is something that we knew we were working on, and we felt that it was important to talk about it with our investor base. And you would see this, over the course of the next few months as we, systematically start diving into these different applications and providing solutions to our customers.
Guys, congratulations on today's news. I love the fact that it's the unknown company, which makes me, draw the inference that it's a really great partner that provides third-party validation. Thanks for being here. It's January the 6th, and we're already together. So I can only imagine what our future holds. I can't wait to have you guys back as soon as possible.
Perfect.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
George.
Thank you.
For everybody at home, you've been watching POA Technologies. Suresh Venkatesan, Chairman, CEO, Vivek Rajgaria, President, General Manager, and Thomas Mika, Executive VP and Chief Financial Officer. You've watched what they've had to say, or you've been listening by podcast, either through Spotify, Apple, Google, or your favorite podcast platform. You've heard some powerful things. You'll probably have to rewatch or re-listen to this again. I think that's how strong this interview has been. But now the rest is up to you to do some due diligence. Make sure you get to the PO website and do some due diligence there. But on Agoracom, we're going to be uploading a new profile page by the end of this week. And that's going to provide a really good layman's overview explanation of what POET's doing, how they're impacting the world, how they're impacting this, right? You guys want the Zoom interview. I want to record it. I need to upload it. We need to edit it. We need to play it on YouTube. You guys need to watch it. Once that video is done, you want YouTube to recommend the next video that you should be watching. All that is happening, and POET Technologies is the company that's enabling that to become lower cost, faster, so that you're happy at home. So if you understand that, do your due diligence, because you may have discovered your next amazing small cap company in the technology world for the next decade. Thanks for joining us. See you next time, and wishing all of you a happy new year, happy 2021. Thanks for being us. Many more to come.